Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Elio San Diego, a proud member of the NXUnite team at Nexus Marketing, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. We're excited to dive into our topic, effective nonprofit operations, board buy-in, and strategic planning. And before we meet our incredible panelists and jump into this conversation, I want to share a few quick logistics. If you're new to us, NXUnite by Nexus Marketing is a powerful community platform built to connect and empower professionals in the mission-driven sector. Whether you're looking for upcoming events, trusted tools and partners, insightful podcasts, or industry thought leaders to follow, NXUnite has you covered. We also host webinars, live demos, and panels such as this with expert voices who are making an impact. Today's panel will run for 45 minutes, and we've built in time for both curated questions from our team and live questions from you, our audience tuning in right now. Feel free to submit your questions in the chat at any point during the conversation. We'll dedicate the second half of the panel to answering as many of them as we possibly can. Before we jump in, we just want to say thank you. We're thrilled to have you here with us, part of this mission-driven community, and we truly appreciate you taking the time to learn and engage with today's topic. On behalf of the NXUnite team, thank you again for joining us. Now let's meet our incredible panelists. I'd like to first introduce Brian Abernathy, General Manager at Convergent Nonprofit Solutions. He has a nonprofit career that spans more than 2 decades. Brian provides leadership to a team of 30 plus nonprofit experts in supporting organizations of all types through capital and comprehensive campaign management and an array of other services, including planning and board strategy. Brian, welcome to the panel.
Thanks, Elio. Grateful to be here.
All right. For our next panels, we have Jenny Burton, Senior Director of Marketing at Boardable. Jenny is a passionate nonprofit advocate, dedicated board member, and champion for causes that matter. With a dynamic career that bridges the tech and retail industries, Jenny has held diverse roles across marketing, product, and sales, thriving equally in team leadership and hands-on execution. She's known for turning big ideas into real-world impact. Jenny, welcome to the panel.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
And for our final panelist, we have Jennifer Hume, pre-sales consultant at SparkRock. With over 15 years of senior leadership experience, Jennifer is a CPA and CMA who specializes in finance, operations, and ERP solutions that drive efficiency and strategic growth. Jennifer delivers impactful ERP demos that highlight how finance and HR solutions can enhance decision-making and streamline operations. Jennifer, welcome to the panel.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Now it's finally time to hear from our panelists and hear their valuable insights with our first question of the day. Brian, I'll have you start us off with this one. How do you define board buy-in when it comes to strategic planning, and why is it so critical for nonprofit operations?
So when we're engaging board members on behalf of our clients and talking about the value they bring, whether it's planning or really anything else, we say there are three critical factors we want from those board members. We want their insight, the perspective, the passion they bring for the mission of the organization, their influence, because they have relational equity with outside stakeholders who can add value to a planning process. And then, of course, their investment. I'd be a bad fundraiser if I didn't bring up the investment side. Skin in the game is a critical factor for board leadership. It validates that what you are doing as a nonprofit is not just something they care about, but they are willing and ready to step in and help make sure that that work can happen. Financial investment is a key part of that. So those are the three primary things that we talk around when we talk about board buy-in.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian, for starting us off. What about you, Jenny? What are your insights on this?
Yeah, when I think about board buy-in, I mean, Brian brought up a lot of really great points, but I definitely feel like, their ability to, show up and be mission aligned is really important in the organizations that we serve at Boardable and that I've been a part of. The fundraising piece, Brian, I feel like is always this controversial thing, right? Like, how much is the fundraising a key element of different board positions and roles. And I've been on boards where it's very different. It's clearly you write a check day one or versus, that you just you're in the top 3 of your giving or, those different types of things. So I always think the fundraising that Brian brought up is a really interesting one. And we kind of talk a lot about it here at Boardable and kind of talking to those folks. But as far as board buy-in, I think a couple of things is meeting attendance and committee engagement are big things, right? That I think are just kind of KPIs to be looking at when it comes to board buy-in. Like, are they showing up? Are they, engaging in a committee? Those types of things. We have some tools as well that we do where you can kind of see, like, are they reading the board book before they come? Are they, like coming into the meetings prepared and all of those types of things. So I think that those are some ways that you can truly measure board buy-in or sort of proxy to measure, right? You're never going to have like a pure, somebody could, at home at night be like, I really don't love this. I really don't buy in, right? But if they're doing those things, if they're showing up, that's a pretty good signal that they're bought in as well.
All right. Thank you for the insights, Jenny. What about you, Jennifer? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I love the comments, right, that both Jenny and Brian have talked about, like with the funding and that sort of thing. And I mean, from my personal experience, the boards that I have worked with, been on a couple as well, is something as simple as those board members asking difficult questions, because I found that those board members that really pushed the senior leadership and made that senior leadership uncomfortable, those are the ones that really I felt were really vested in the organizational goals, and keeping that leadership team feet to the fire, right? That what they're doing is what the mission is all about. So that would be what I add to the other comments. So thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you again, everyone. We're off to a great start. For the next question, I'll have Jenny start us off. The second question is, what are some early signals that a board is or is not aligned with an organization's strategic direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that when it comes to that, I think that the reason that boards get unaligned with that is that there's like a mission that lives over in outer space, and then there's like the real everyday work, right? And I think that that's that mission drift, or sort of this idea of there's the mission that we talk about, and then there's like the real world over there. And I think that if an organization feels like that, you're probably not in a great spot. And so I think one of the things is making sure that your mission can be kind of translated to measurable outcomes. So kind of board level KPIs to be able to look at and to say, okay, this is a mission, but this is what in kind of real world terms, if you will, that I'll be able to measure that I'm having these measurable outcomes to get to the mission, right? I know it, like, sometimes missions get like really like kind of this language that's very like over the top. And I love that, right? It's very aspirational. But I think that lack of bringing that down to sort of these measurable KPIs is really when that kind of disconnect happens. And so I think the faster that a board can really work to kind of this idea of missions to metrics, and we like having a one pager of like, this is the missions and this is what those metrics look like. And then I think also, even just like starting out this conversation, depending on kind of the maturity of your organization, it's like, what KPI, if this moved 10%, would I feel like my mission was really working, right? And so like if you're a after school hunger program, right, like that's I don't want to say a pretty easy one, but a pretty easy one that you might be able to survey folks, and you might be able to like get insights from after school teachers, and like those types of things, right? And be able to say, this is the thing that's going to move it. So I hope that's helpful, but that's kind of my insight is really trying to get accelerating that high level mission down to those tactical KPIs as fast as possible, and getting the board buy-in in that process.
All right. Thank you for starting us off, Jenny. What about you, Jennifer? What are your thoughts on this?
I think that it kind of relates to, about engagement, right? When you have, uh, boards that are not engaged, right? And I've seen that where those board members just stop participating, right? Whether it's in board meetings or taking themselves off of committees, like that silence, right? You can really see that sometimes with board members. So those, to me, that's a huge red flag. And then sometimes even that revisiting of decisions, right? Where a decision's made and they're like, well, yeah, but I'd like to talk about this again. And it's like, well, we've already discussed that. So that's from my perspective. So thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. What about you, Brian?
I love Jenny's comment about measurables, right? And those metrics. How willing and consistently is a board member advocating for the outcomes your organization is delivering? And then, kind of to your point, Jennifer, did they have the ability and are they willing to speak to the why? Not just what we're accomplishing and where we're moving the needle, but why does it matter? Those, I would say, are the most critical signals of a board member's alignment with your mission. And some of that, there's an education and an informative side from program and executive staff for a nonprofit. In some cases, to be able to communicate how your board member can convey that. Program leadership is in the weeds and understands how the web connects to move the needle on whatever it is, housing, healthcare, education. Sometimes you've got to give the board member that cheat sheet, if you will, to be able to say, here's what we're doing that is moving the needle over here. Then they can go out and they can be that advocate that we want them to be. But if they're not willing to do that, that's a signal that there's some gap that's worth addressing.
All right, thank you so much, Brian. Thank you again, everyone. We have so many insights already. We're just getting started. Let's proceed to our third question for this session. And Jennifer, I'll have you start us off with this one. So the third question is, what's one effective way to engage board members in long-term planning without overwhelming them with operational details?
I mean, I think the simple answer to that, I think, is giving them those high level dashboards, storyboards, right, to follow. Um, yeah, getting that big picture, and keeping them out of the weeds, because that's what the senior leadership's jobs are. So ensuring that they have all of those, the high level dashboards. So thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. What about you, Brian?
Something that I think is incredibly valuable for board members to be informed in and invited to help shape, asterisk is also critically valuable from a fundraising perspective. I won't be able to take my fundraising hat off, so sorry about that. But having your board members speak into a logic model or a theory of change of what are we doing as an organization and why do we do each program? How does it move us from mission to impact, and connecting those? You can have a lot of really detailed conversations with board members, speaking into their area of deepest passion or expertise, depending on their professional credentials, inviting them to help shape a piece outside of a bigger picture group conversation. What you're really asking them to do is come in and develop ownership over a key component of the plan and the organization's alignment. It's a great way to give them a platform, not just to have ownership, but also, Jenny, to your point of, I'm sorry, Jennifer, it was you, who's going to ask the hard questions, right? Giving them a platform and asking them to pull the yarn on the sweater a little bit. Let's see where this unravels, because we're going to need to tighten all of those things up before we go into a bigger audience.
All right, thank you so much for the insights, Brian. What about you, Jenny?
I think it really, for me, it really comes down to, again, sort of like the mission sometimes can get really big. I think strategic plans, I mean, I've seen strategic plans be reams of paper almost, right? And sometimes the appendices are important and relevant and all of those things. But I think really the ability to focus down on 3 to 5 priorities maybe, and having somebody in the organization, so an executive leader as well as a board member kind of tagged on each one of those priorities, and then truly making it a recurring agenda item, right? Like, and not skipping it, not just being like, oh, that's on track, but truly doing that status update on those like 3 to 5 priorities. I mean, it really is one of those things that I think it's that discipline aspect of like, we said these were the three to 5 priorities. We're going to talk about them at every board meeting, right? We're not going to like skip over or gloss over these, and we're going to get an update, and we're going to kind of have that recurring piece there. I think also kind of tracking the tasks with owners there, not down to the nitty gritty level, right? But like the high level, like we're going to be submitting this grant on this day, if that's like a big thing for this organization, or we're going to be like awarding this grant if it's a community foundation, whatever that might look like, and having sort of that visibility there, just so the entire board and organization is all on the same page to like, these are kind of key benchmarks that are going to keep us going against this strategic plan. But I do feel like that 3 to 5 priorities and kind of having a shared owner, like an executive owner, and a board member that's the owner. And, it's probably going to line up to that board member's passions, things that they know more about, in theory, to be able to work together there. So.
All right, thank you, Jenny, and thank you, panelists. We've come to the last question from me before we turn things over to our audience. So if you haven't already, now's the perfect time to drop your questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get as many as we can later in the Q&A portion. I've already seen quite a few, so excited for that. All right, for the next question, Jenny, I'll have you start us off again for this one. The fourth question is, how do you recommend organizations build board confidence when adopting new tools or launching major initiatives like campaign or a tech platform?
Absolutely. I think getting their buy-in early, helping them understand the why, right? This is why we need to do this as an organization, and getting their buy-in early into what problem we're solving. I think I see that a lot of times happening with technology or different campaigns or that type of thing. Everybody has their own interpretation of like what's the problem that it's solving. So then they might be disappointed when it doesn't solve their problem, right? Because that's not the intended thing. So I think taking that step back, before you even like think about what vendors, before you think about, like any of the details or the cost or anything like that, we're just thinking about like, here's the problem, here's what we need to solve, and making sure that everybody's aligned on that before you move forward. Because I think that's really where it's sort of that classic, like, expectation, you missed the expectations, but your expectations were wrong to begin with. So like everybody kind of leaves disappointed with those types of things. I think especially right now, sort of in the world that we're living in where, Brian's going to love when I say this, but funds are tight and fundraising is so important and all of those things. So I know that spending money on tech and spending money on platforms and software and all those things gets harder. I think it is just making sure that you know what your problems are, what you're solving with that. Engage the board in the process, and then also engage the board in the process at the beginning. And then I actually do think there's that kind of this middle period where maybe the board's not super engaged, right? Like we've all decided that this is what we need. We're going to go do some of the nitty gritty work. We're going to go kind of do the analysis, that type of thing. And we're going to come back to the board and be like, here's our proposal, right? So I think there is always this interesting kind of ebb and flow with the boards in kind of any decision, whether it's fundraising, whether it's technology, is engage them up front, make sure there's a lot of alignment, go maybe do some of the detailed work as an organization, and then come back to the board, right? I don't know that the board always has to be super involved throughout that whole process, because then you do end up with that too many cooks in the kitchen scenario that we all know too well. So those are my thoughts. Sorry, that was a little long, but something I guess I care about more than I thought. So.
No problem, Jenny. Thank you so much for starting us off. What about you, Brian? How do you recommend organizations build that board confidence?
So I am not the person to speak to a tech platform, but I can speak to a fundraising campaign, right? If you have major fundraising needs on the horizon and your board isn't aligned around the purpose, the scope, the execution plan, you are almost certainly destined to not be successful, because you will have to have your board step up to be an advocate at a different level for a major fundraising initiative. If it's whatever it might be, capital, comprehensive, endowment, anything you're trying to fund, your board's got to understand the why and be ready to advocate for that. And you should be able to very explicitly clarify what you need from them before you go into that effort, whatever it might be, whether that's your chief development officer, VP of advancement, or a campaign counsel. Giving that clarity, board members will need to know what's expected of them so that they understand how to go out and deliver on that.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. Lastly, Jennifer, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I love the, start with why, right? I do lots of that in what I do now, ensuring that they understand, right, the strategic rationale. But I also think, we talked about, dashboards and providing them with the right level of information, I think is also super important, because you're not going to give them, technical specs or, they want the high level outcomes. Even so far as, if it's a technology or an ERP upgrade, what does that translate into, whether it's employee morale or, less overtime, things like that. Those things, boards like to be, kept apprised of. So I think that, it's really key not to overwhelm boards with technical information, but giving them, those the high level outcomes. And then, of course, when you're in project, if you can celebrate quick wins, right, with them, whether it's at a board meeting, I think is also really beneficial for the board to be excited as well about what's going on. So, yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you again, panelists. All right, the moment I'm sure many of you are waiting for our Q&A portion. Reminder you can continue to send in questions as we go through. We'll work on answering as many as we can. I do have a few questions already from the audience, so let's start us off with the question from Caitlin. The question is, what are effective and respectful strategies for addressing situations where board members or even the full board are not following through on their duties and responsibilities? How can leadership correct this behavior while maintaining positive relationships and accountability? So, for this question, anyone can answer. Feel free to unmute your mic and let our audience know.
Well, I can start you off on that because this I love this because I've been on both sides. Defining the roles, like there has to be the roles defined between governance and management, and using metrics, right, not micromanagement, right, when evaluating. So yeah, that's I'm not going to go on and on because the roles and responsibilities have to be defined, and you need strong leadership on both the board and the senior leadership when they cross, right, to be able to say, this is my area, this is your area. Let's make sure that we all understand what our responsibilities are. So.
And I love that answer. That's so good. Especially the difference in operating and governing boards, right? Who's going to get in the weeds and who's not. Very quickly, review and understand your bylaws and address term limits. Sometimes, I heard this from a nonprofit leader here in the Metro Atlanta area, sometimes the way to deal with board members who are not doing what they need to is, I'm quoting here, plaque them and whack them. Commemorate their service on a plaque, celebrate all the impact they've had, and move them out and move another board member in. That's a hard dynamic. But overly entrenched board members who are anchored to an older way of doing things in a nonprofit market that is increasingly innovative and complex can be a barrier to achieving the sustainable impact that you might be pushing towards, right? So sometimes the hard decision is some board members might need to move off of the board.
I would agree with all of those things. And I do think that, having that direct conversation of, is it time for you to maybe, do you have capacity right now, type of thing. Two other quick things I'll note is I am more surprised when I talk more about fundraising than I mean to, because I spend a lot of time in the board management world, which integrates with fundraising. But I'm going to talk about fundraising again as a sense of, I think sometimes people give or offer or recruit a board member for their fundraising capabilities and capacity. And I think that it's okay to maybe have a separate advisory board or a separate a separate type of board that's maybe not your board of directors, where folks like that might really flourish and live better. Maybe it is a subcommittee. Maybe it is sort of a higher level, not even higher level, but just different type of board that is not your board of directors. So I think that kind of thinking through that, and if that might be a strategy that makes sense, so you don't get potentially quite as many folks that are like, yeah, they're writing big checks, so now it's really hard for us to have this like tough conversation, right? So that's one thing that I've seen work pretty effectively, and there's kind of different ways that you can structure and name that and make that work as well. I did want to say one other thing, just because it's top of mind, because I just personally shared this on LinkedIn. But is this idea? Rhea Wong had it in her newsletter, who is somebody that I would suggest following. I really like her content, but she said something about like, it is a little bit of a culture shift that I just will highlight here. This idea of thank you so much for agreeing to be here. And she had said, instead of that being the sentiment that you kind of build amongst your board, it's more of we're building something extraordinary and we deserve board members who are ready to get in the game. So I have seen both cultures on boards that I've served on and boards that I've worked with of like, I want to be on that board. And that's a board that, is amazing versus like, they're so lucky to have me, and I think that being able to shift that mindset is really what I think is the core of this, right? And there's boards that I really want to be a part of, because they've created that culture. And I'm going to show up, I'm going to do the work, right? Because it's kind of an honor to be there. So yeah.
All right, thank you everyone for sharing your insights. Caitlin, thank you for the question. I hope you were able to learn something new from our panelists today. All right, the next question came from Kevin. The question is, can you talk about metrics for the board members themselves? What should be expected of them based on best practices? Right? Again, open question. Anyone can unmute their mics.
I would say one of the most important things here is moving your board members from your activity, what you're doing, to how it's affecting change, right? Going from activity to outcome. We're serving kids so that they can get through high school and not drop out. Well, the net effect of that is their economic potential is growing. Their capacity to go on to some post-secondary certification and have better potential for themselves, for their children and their future family, for the community around them. It's great to say we're supporting students in need. It's a totally different thing to say the organization I'm on the board of invests in students' lives, and the result is not just that their quality of life is better in high school, but they move on and they're able to achieve so much more for themselves, their family, and go out and do good in the community because of it. So closing that gap from activity to outcome, I think, is huge.
I do think these metrics sometimes are tough, to be honest, to be able to say like, these are the metrics to track against a board member. I feel like meeting attendance, as lame as that can be, like meeting attendance, meeting your like fundraising requirements, sort of like, are they completing tasks, those types of things. So I'm just going to note that I think it's a tough one, to kind of get right. Might look different for different organizations, for sure. But I just wanted to note, like, it's a tough one. I mean, I do think there are, 360 reviews and different kind of things that you can put into place as well, depending on the complexity of your org. So.
And I just realized I totally misunderstood the point of that question. It was internal metrics, not external metrics. So sorry for my confusing answer there.
And I just want to add, I know that on one board that I was on, they actually had expectations like in their documents on what coming to a board meeting, that's a metric, but like you said, right, it's that participation. So on one of the boards there was an expectation of involvement in subcommittees that then were reported up to the board. So those are metrics, right, that can also be measured on activities. Some were even internal groups that would meet that would require a board member. So then you'd have that board member participating in that as well. So, yeah.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Kevin, thank you again for the question. Next, we have is a question from Levon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I believe Brian was able to give a short answer through the chat, but the question is, what recommendations do you have for the board onboarding process to help with buy-in from the start?
On the board onboarding process, I think that there's, there's all the formality pieces, right, which I think are super important and important to have buttoned up. So like expectations, making sure they know where all their documents are in one central location. I mean, ideally, depending on sort of requirements and public accessibility and all of the things that might be in there, ideally they're able to kind of review agendas and minutes from past meetings, right? So they just kind of like get a flavor of like, what am I walking into? What is this going to look like? I also do really like just sort of a kind of functional, silly thing of like pairing new board members with an existing board member, right? Like kind of having a mentor guide for that, or at least somebody that you can grab a cup of coffee with and, like get to know. I think those are some of the kind of key ways I think to like successfully onboard folks. There's kind of like the personal side, but then there's that functional side of just making sure everything's easy to access, everything's in one central location. Like all of those things, I think just help a board member get up to speed better and kind of quickly learn the culture of the board.
And I think understanding, why that board member has come on, like, is there a personal reason? Is there a connection that could be made quickly, whether it's, a senior leader that's responsible for that area, things like that. Really, I think understanding why they're on the board and then taking that information to help, get that buy-in right from the start with that board member.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I believe that's the last of the audience questions that we have that came in the chat. But we do have some questions that came in the survey. So I'll be calling you all individually. So just we can have that sequence again of who's going to answer the question first. The question is, how do you advise organizations to balance board oversight with operational flexibility during strategy execution? So who would like to go first?
I think a lot of this is bylaws driven, right? And so there's an important step here around board structure that I am not a lawyer. I'm not even going to pretend to be one. But understanding your bylaws and the governance structure that you need to work with. And also having that clarity, again, going back, I forget which of the other panelists mentioned this, but that understanding of how and where is the board going to get into operational dynamics versus remaining in a governance and fiduciary role. When that line gets blurred, it can get really uncomfortable for staff and really exhausting for board members. There may be times in an organization, and I'm on a board where this is the case right now, where because of staff limitations, board members say, hey, let me put my hand up and I will step further in on this so that we can move forward on a major strategic initiative. But very, very good clarity on the front end is critical, and knowing that you're not stepping outside of your bylaws, because that can create some interesting dynamics.
All right, thank you, Brian. What about you, Jenny? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think well, I'm actually sorry. Do you mind to repeat the question? Because I feel like I got into Brian's answer and just wanted to make sure that I'm back to the question. So
the question is, how do you advise organizations to balance board oversight with operational flexibility during strategy execution?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Brian's answer is like really like it kind of does come back to bylaws, right? Because like $50,000 spend is nothing to some organizations I've been a part of, whereas it's like a huge amount to others, right? So I think that does a board need to be involved in a $50,000 spend if your operating budget is 50 million? Maybe not, right? But if it is a small operating budget, that number changes. So I do think while I know I went fiscal really quickly on that one, I do think that that's where a lot of this comes into play is like, I think it's back to that whole like kind is clear type of world, right? That if there's clear expectations and there's like clear bylaws, then this doesn't really become as much of a point of friction, if you will, in the sense of like, should the board be involved? Well, does it involve a C-level hire or fire? Does it involve an expense over this amount? Does it involve our capital campaign? Does it involve, right, there's maybe like a list of 5 or 6 things. And if it falls out of that, then it kind of can be up to like the board and the executives of like, can the board be helpful, right? Like there's that piece of the decision tree too, right? Maybe it doesn't actually require board approval or doesn't require board oversight, but if the board can be helpful, like for sure, use them, right? But I think that it really is back to those bylaws and making sure you're updating those bylaws regularly too, because I have been in organizations where that that 50K was important at one point, and then the board's spending a ton of time talking about like changing the trash delivery service, and it's like, this is probably not the best use of time, but it is now. We have 5 locations, that's 50K a year, like that type of thing. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Jennifer, do you have anything to add to the question?
Actually, I do. I mean, I think what the other panelists said about the clarifying of the roles and the bylaws, and I mean, I've been involved in creating bylaws like from scratch with a legal team, but actually something that I've seen that because people don't always read the bylaws. You're supposed to, but I think having and I've seen this where there's a written like board staff role agreement, right? Where it clearly defines what is the board role, what is the staff's role. And when you have new board members come on, that they, here's the bylaws, but here's an agreement. Like this is what the expectations are from the start. And I love the what you said, Jenny, about like the evolution, right? Where I was involved in an organization when I started, it was 25 million. And when I left, it was 60 million, right? In a 10-year span. So that was quite a bit of growth. And what I found was that I was being restricted by these bylaws, right? That said, this expense over this amount has to be approved by, a board member. And it's like, but we've changed, right? And so I always encourage organizations to fully understand what their bylaws are, whether it's, a schedule of authorization was one place I saw that, over this amount is this and this, and not being afraid to revisit that and making sure that it still makes sense. Because what I was working with when it was 25 million was something that was written in the 70s, right? And fast forward, this is like 2012, and it was like, but this no longer makes sense. So don't be afraid to revisit those bylaws when it makes sense. So that was a way longer answer than I usually would give. So
No problem,
passionate about
Jennifer.
that
We
one.
appreciate the insight. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, thank you so much, everyone. That is the last of the questions that we have from our survey, and we are getting to our last few minutes of questions with all of you. So if we didn't get to your question, to those in the audience, if you have questions specific to your organization, we want to make sure that you get connected with the relevant team to answer them. So we have just sent a quick survey in the chat where you can indicate which panelists you particularly want to hear from after the session, as well as provide any feedback on the panel. So I'll share your interest with the relevant panelists after this session. All right, we are going to wrap up this portion of the panel so we can stick to our schedule. I've had such a wonderful time hearing from all of our panelists today, so I'm hoping to get one final piece of insight from all of them. So the question is, looking ahead, what skills or mindsets do boards need to cultivate to lead nonprofits through strategic growth in today's environment? And please let our audience know where they can find you and your organization. Brian, have you started us off with this one?
Is everybody expecting a fundraising answer? Uh, in seriousness, though, with the complexities is the word I'll use around grants. Innovative approach to funding solutions is going to make the difference for so many nonprofits over the next short number of years in terms of operations, but long term for sustainability. Thinking about how to diversify and expand revenue streams, looking towards earned revenue where feasible. Think about the mindset of entrepreneurial perspective you can bring into your board to help shift perspective there, because the landscape for funding is different today than it was 9 months ago.
All right, thank you, Brian. Lastly, can you please let our audience know where they can find you and your organization?
Absolutely. You can visit convergentnonprofit.com and find great resources and ways to contact us there. Thanks for letting me participate today.
All right, thank you so much, Brian. We appreciate it. Next up is Jenny. Same question. Looking ahead, what skills or mindsets do boards need to cultivate to lead nonprofits through strategic growth in today's environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really resonating with Brian here. The idea of, experimentation and innovation, which I think is, when you think of like, how does that work with governance, right? Like those don't feel like kind of words that all work in the same word cloud, but I think today they have to, right? So you've got to keep that strong governance in place, but at the same time, what worked 10 years ago, that same game plan for most organizations isn't working today, or is not going to continue to work in the future. So I think that, approaching things with an idea of experimentation, an idea of innovation, is really mission critical for folks. So I run marketing at Boardable. We're a board management platform that really helps on that governance side of things. I'm on that side of the house, and work with nonprofits, educational institutions. Boardable.com. Once you get there, you'll find your way. We'll get you a demo, anything that you need from there. So thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Jenny. Last but not least, Jennifer, what is your final piece of insight and where can we find you and your organization?
Okay. Um, so my bit of advice to boards, I wrote a couple of things down here. Invest in talent, right? Talent is really can be hard to find. So invest in that, and be connectors, right? If you see there's a struggle, be that connection. If you have a connection, be that for that senior leadership, and really take that risk oversight seriously, because sometimes that gets missed. So, and ask the hard questions as usual. That's what I will end with any board information, is you need to ask the hard questions, because it will come back to you. So. And information on SparkRock can be found at sparkrock.com. And again, there's lots of ways to, lots of information on there. And also I can be found on LinkedIn as well myself. So thank you. It's been great. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you again, our panelists. And that brings us to the end of today's panel. A huge thank you to our panelists for sharing their valuable insights. It's been a fantastic discussion with all of you. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We hope you're walking away with fresh ideas and practical takeaways to support the important work that you do every day. We got an exciting lineup of panels coming up in the next few months, and we'd love to see you there. Be sure to check out the NXUnite community platform or follow us on LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Even better, just go ahead and RSVP now. Once you're logged in, it only takes a click. It has been a pleasure speaking with you all. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Jenny, Brian, and Jennifer. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.